Any sexual tension between you and Travolta when you were making that film?
Extreme sexual tension.
Really?
Debra Winger was once considered one of the finest actresses of the 1980s, a woman who could set the screen ablaze with nothing more than a glance, a gesture, or a line spoken straight from the heart. Within just 3 years, she earned 2 Oscar nominations for An Officer and a Gentleman in Terms of Endearment, was compared to legends like Jane Fonda and Meryl Streep, and became the darling of every major director from Hollywood to Europe. And yet, just over a decade later, she all but vanished. No shocking scandal, no public downfall or disastrous role. Only one unspoken truth echoed through Hollywood. No one wanted to work with Debra Winger anymore. She was branded difficult, arrogant, unmanageable, and for years she stayed silent. No justifications, no image-repairing interviews, no compromises. But the truth, like all truths in Hollywood, is never simple. Behind every criticism lies a story. Behind every cold glance, a wound not yet healed. And behind every moment Debra Winger lashed out was an insult that would have wounded anyone else just the same. In this article, we'll explore the relationships that shaped and shattered Debra Winger's career. The co-stars who hurt her, the directors who tried to silence her, the producers who dismissed her, and the friendships that never came to be. This isn't the story of a rebellious actress. It's the story of a woman who dared to say no in a world that only loved those who said yes. John Travolta, From Love to a Tooth-Shattering Slap. In 1980, Urban Cowboy wasn't just the breakout role that put Debra Winger on the Hollywood map. It was also the first time she experienced a relationship filled with passion, but equally riddled with instability. Her co-star was John Travolta, a rising star fresh off Saturday Night Fever, both charming and defiant, approachable yet unpredictable. From their very first meeting, Winger sensed something was off. Travolta didn't start with a greeting or a simple congratulations. Instead, he asked if she was Jewish, then immediately followed up by asking whether she had gone to college. Seemingly harmless questions, but to Winger, they carried a subtle judgment, a quiet prejudice, an evaluation based on appearance, education, and background. And finally, he made a crude sexual remark she has never publicly repeated. And yet, in the middle of that initial friction, something still ignited, as if cinema itself was drawn to chaos. They collided. On screen, they became a tempestuous, fiery couple. Off-screen, they began a real relationship, intoxicating, but laced with toxicity. In one love scene, Travolta was instructed to slap Winger's character, a standard fake hit like any other film take. But when the cameras rolled, he slapped her for real, so hard it broke one of her teeth. There was no apology, no pause to check on her, only pain, physical and worse, emotional. And in a strange twist, after that slap, Travolta proposed to her. Debra Winger refused. No lengthy explanation, no dramatic scene. She simply said no, an instinctive reaction, realizing the relationship had crossed from passion into domination and control. She walked away from him, from that distorted romance, but the fractures from that first major relationship would follow her throughout her career. Years later, when asked about Travolta, she responded with neither bitterness nor fondness. Only silence, the kind that belongs to someone who once loved, once trusted, and once got hurt, in a way Hollywood never gives anyone the time to truly heal. Richard Gere, The Brick Wall That Couldn't Be Broken. An Officer and a Gentleman marked one of the greatest artistic achievements of Debra Winger's career. She received an Oscar nomination, was praised by critics for her emotional depth and authenticity, but to her, it was an experience she bluntly described. "I didn't love that movie when I was making it, and I certainly don't love it now." Her co-star, Richard Gere, the man audiences imagined as charming, reserved, and soulful, was, to Winger, nothing more than a brick wall. That phrase wasn't a joke. For years, it became symbolic of the distance and resistance between two people who couldn't connect off-screen, despite playing an iconic romantic couple on screen. Louis Gossett Jr., who portrayed the stern drill sergeant, later confirmed in his memoir that Winger and Gere avoided each other whenever the cameras weren't rolling. No conversations, no interaction, not even a flicker of warmth. Richard Gere never denied it. In an interview, he admitted there was tension between them, but offered no further explanation. Winger, on the other hand, was far more candid. In a conversation with the Daily Mail, she confessed that her own insecurities about acting made her irritable, and she often took it out on her co-stars, especially Gere. "I took it out on everybody." But the conflict wasn't just personal. For Winger, the deepest wounds came from behind the camera. In an interview with The Telegraph, she revealed that director Taylor Hackford and producer Don Simpson treated her like damaged goods. Simpson, known for his crude comments about women, once said outright that Winger wasn't F-able, an insult that would be unforgivable even by 1980s Hollywood standards. And it didn't stop there. Winger recalled being asked to take diuretics on certain days because, according to the filmmakers, her face looked puffy on screen. These weren't medical recommendations. They came from the men in the editing room. Men who felt entitled to manipulate a woman's body as if she were just another prop. Winger was furious, but she didn't back down. She objected to a particular scene she believed betrayed the integrity of her character, and the entire shoot came to a halt. Taylor Hackford was enraged, but later, after reviewing the footage, he had to admit Winger was absolutely right, from an acting standpoint. The problem was, in Hollywood, being right doesn't guarantee forgiveness, especially if you're a woman. When a male actor halts production over dissatisfaction, he's a perfectionist. When Winger did it, she was labeled difficult, uncontrollable, a problem. Don Simpson and Taylor Hackford. When the producer becomes the bully. With Debra Winger, tensions with co-stars like Richard Gere might have been cold, passive, and laced with silence. But what happened behind the camera, especially with director Taylor Hackford and producer Don Simpson, was something far more humiliating. A daily erosion of dignity that chipped away at her self-worth, piece by piece. On the set of An Officer and a Gentleman, Winger wasn't just an actress proving her craft. She was a young woman navigating a system ruled by men, and those men made no attempt to hide their desire to dominate everything, including her body. Taylor Hackford, the powerful but rigid director, was once bluntly described by Winger as an animal. It wasn't an insult. It was the primal response of someone who had been pushed into a corner too many times. Winger said she was frequently treated like a second-class performer despite being the emotional soul of the film. But the deepest wounds weren't inflicted from behind the camera. They came from the editing room. Don Simpson, a producer infamous for being ruthless, vulgar, and obsessed with controlling actresses, once said in front of the entire crew that Debra Winger wasn't fable enough to be the lead. A chilling insult, wrapped in sexism and the objectification that has long plagued the industry. And it didn't end there. After each day of filming, Simpson would review the footage and decide. Her face looked puffy. She needed to take diuretics. No consultation with a doctor, no consideration for her personal comfort. If she didn't look beautiful enough on screen, she had to medicate. Debra Winger didn't stay silent. She pushed back. At one point, she refused to shoot a scene she felt completely misrepresented the character's psychology, an act of resistance that would have been considered routine for male actors of the time. But for Winger, it earned her the labels difficult, troublesome, and left her isolated within her own film. Director Hackford was furious at the production delay. But later, after reviewing the scene and reassessing her reasons, he had to admit she was right. Not just emotionally right, but structurally, psychologically correct in her interpretation. Yet that admission came with no apology, only a quiet warning. She's not someone you can easily control. And in Hollywood, nothing is more threatening than a woman who can't be controlled. After that film, Winger never worked with Hackford or Simpson again. She rarely spoke of them in interviews, but when asked, her silence carried the weight of an indictment. I haven't forgotten. I've just chosen not to relive it. Madonna. Not the same league, not the same path. In the early 1990s, Debra Winger was cast in the leading role of A League of Their Own, a heartfelt story about women baseball players during World War II. It was a project she believed in deeply. She trained with the Chicago Cubs for 3 straight months, building her physical endurance, learning the sport's techniques, and preparing to embody a real athlete. For Winger, this wasn't just another role. It was a serious commitment to history, to women, and to the craft of acting. Then Madonna entered the picture. When Winger heard that the world-famous pop singer would be joining the cast, she didn't get angry. She didn't argue. She didn't call the director or producers to complain. She did one thing. She walked away. Simply. Decisively. Without explanation. Later, she told the press, "I felt the film had changed direction. From a historical story, it became something more like an Elvis movie, where music and showbiz visuals drown out the original spirit." And that wasn't the kind of film she wanted to be a part of. She never launched a direct attack on Madonna. But when asked about the pop star's acting in the film, Winger delivered a single, icy line that everyone in Hollywood understood perfectly. "I think Madonna's film career speaks for itself. No drama, no bitterness, just a sigh from someone who no longer had patience for artistic compromise." Winger didn't walk away from the film out of jealousy or pride. She walked away because she knew, when your heart no longer believes in a project, it no longer deserves your talent or your integrity. Like a master craftsman who looks at subpar materials and chooses not to begin, Gina Davis replaced her. The film became a major success and a beloved piece of American pop culture. But Winger had no regrets, because for her, absence is sometimes the final act of artistry an actor can perform. Shirley MacLaine, a battle that would never find peace. Of all the tense relationships Debra Winger experienced, none surpassed Shirley MacLaine, the woman she called mother on screen, yet never came close to calling a colleague in real life. In 1983, they starred as mother and daughter in Terms of Endearment, a cinematic masterpiece, winner of Best Picture at the Oscars, and a film that earned both actresses nominations for Best Actress. But while the film told a tender story of maternal love, the set was a quiet battleground, where 2 strong-willed women clashed in every scene, every glance, every interruption. When they first met on set, MacLaine, already a legend with 3 Oscar nominations, arrived in a fur coat, an elegant dress, and the poised aura of old-school Hollywood. Winger, in contrast, showed up in combat boots, a short skirt, and a defiant stare. MacLaine later admitted in her memoir, "I saw her and thought, oh my God, it wasn't a judgment. It was the instinctive alarm of someone from a different generation. From the start, director James L. Brooks had to concede. No one understood their relationship, not even they did." The tension peaked when Winger, always impulsive and assertive, yelled at MacLaine during a take when she missed her mark. "Hit your mark!" MacLaine, not one to be rattled, snapped back, "I know what hitting a mark means." That's when Winger walked off, lifted her skirt slightly, looked over her shoulder, and farted in Shirley MacLaine's face. MacLaine later recounted this moment in her memoir, My Lucky Stars. Winger didn't deny it. On a 2018 talk show, when asked by Andy Cohen whether the story about farting and licking feet was true, she gave a faint smile and said, "There's something true in that." They didn't hate each other like enemies. They challenged each other like wild animals trapped in the same cage, where only one could emerge intact, at least in terms of stature. When MacLaine won the Oscar, she walked on stage and delivered the now iconic line, "I deserve this." It wasn't aimed directly at Winger, but the entire room knew who stood in its shadow. Winger later said, "We didn't have lunch together, but there was respect. The kind of respect shared between boxers after a brutal fight. You know your opponent has deadly moves, but you never want a rematch. Nearly 4 decades have passed, yet the public hasn't let it go. Talk shows still ask. The media still resurrects it. And every time, Winger just smirks, letting others reconstruct the tale however they like. Because some battles, win or lose, never truly heal." John Malkovich, a runway model disguised as an actor. By the late 1980s, Debra Winger had worked with all kinds of co-stars, some charming but toxic, others so withdrawn they felt like strangers, from physically aggressive lovers to emotionally unpredictable screen mothers. But in 1990, on the set of The Sheltering Sky, she encountered a new kind of partner, John Malkovich, a man she bluntly described as a runway model. Not because he was handsome, not because he dressed flamboyantly, but because, in Winger's words, he looked like he was performing himself, not the character. For Winger, that was the ultimate offense. She believed in raw, honest acting, in spontaneous emotion, and the grounded connection between two people in a shared frame. But Malkovich, with his cold gaze, abstract style, and a way of speaking as if he were narrating an internal monologue, was completely invisible to her. In every scene, she didn't see a scene partner. She saw a well-designed display, without a soul. Winger never hid her feelings. No metaphors, no evasions. In one interview, when asked what it was like working with Malkovich, she didn't hesitate. "He was like a runway model. He moved beautifully. His face was beautiful, but I had no idea who I was talking to." Some said it was jealousy, that Winger was lashing out because her co-star didn't engage with her. But to those who had worked with her, it wasn't surprising. She couldn't stand pretense. She rejected performances aimed at the audience instead of rooted in the truth of a character. And The Sheltering Sky, though crafted with great care by director Bernardo Bertolucci, rich with haunting Moroccan landscapes and philosophical depth, was, for Winger, an empty experience. Not because of the script, not because of the cinematography, but because the man sitting across from her each day never truly looked her in the eye. After that film, Winger never worked with Malkovich again, nor did she speak of him with bitterness in later years. He remained nothing more than a faint wisp in her memory, like the very style of acting she could never accept, cold, distant, and heartless. Across 2 decades in Hollywood, Debra Winger lacked neither talent, fame, nor charisma. She had iconic roles, Oscar nominations, and an audience that loved her for her raw, unfiltered honesty. But she also had something Hollywood rarely tolerated in a woman: ego, intellect, and an unwillingness to comply. For men, those qualities are labeled independence and artistic vision. For Winger, they became difficult, unworkable, dangerous. Director James Bridges once admitted in an interview that he had been so angry with Winger he halted production when she refused to shoot a scene. But later, upon review, he had to confess, she was completely right. Winger didn't rebel to sabotage. She simply refused to stay silent when the truth was distorted, when a character was falsified, when an actress was turned into a puppet for male control. She once said, "If a male actor did what I did, they'd call him a perfectionist. But me? I was trouble." Hollywood doesn't forgive women like that. It doesn't forgive those who won't bow to directors, who walk away from roles they can't believe in, who speak truthfully about over-glorified male stars. And Winger knew it well. In 1995, standing in an open field in Ireland beside her husband, she turned to him and said a simple sentence: "I'm done." No regrets, no drama, no press conference to announce retirement. She simply stepped away, realizing that the roles being offered were just tired replicas of what she'd already done. No more challenges, no more honest dialogue, and no reason left to keep enduring it. She chose to leave, to be a mother, a wife, a quiet observer of the world, to choose small stages over red carpets, to live artfully instead of living for art. Debra Winger wasn't a bad girl of Hollywood. She didn't destroy sets, didn't battle addiction, didn't manipulate the press to build myths. She just didn't know how to bow her head and never learned. Maybe that's why Hollywood, a place that prefers obedient women, never knew what to do with her. And maybe that's also why she's never been forgotten. Debra Winger didn't disappear because she failed. She walked away while still at the top, when she still had choices, when she could still say no. And that very act of choosing, in Hollywood's eyes, was the one thing it could never forgive. She didn't please others. She didn't bend to fit the frame male directors had pre-designed. She wasn't afraid to upset co-stars. She didn't fake softness just to hold on to the next role. She refused to compromise, and that was her greatest crime in an industry built on compliance. Debra Winger clashed, was wounded, and was pushed aside. But she never betrayed herself. And perhaps that's worth more than 3 golden Oscars. Today, as more young actresses begin to speak out about injustice, about the pressure to stay silent, about how their image and dignity are controlled, the world finally understands. Winger lived that fight decades ago, alone, without social media, without allies, without a hashtag campaign. She had only one thing, a voice that never let itself be silenced. So if anyone asks why Debra Winger was never beloved in the film industry, ask them this: was it because she was too difficult, or because she dared to say what others were afraid to? And what about you? If you were in Debra Winger's shoes, caught between fame and freedom, what would you choose? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this story gave you something to reflect on, don't forget to hit follow, so you won't miss the next bold, defiant soul we bring into the light.